So, with this, we come to our third session of the day, My Safe Struggle from Noida chapter. Before we start, we would like to thank our founding sponsor, Innovation Roots. Innovation Roots is a leading consulting and training service provider helping organizations to achieve business agility and beyond. It is one of the leaders and pioneers in niche publishing services and well known for content collaboration with global thought leaders, authors, and creators. For more information, visit our website www.innovationroots.com. Do's and don'ts: join 5 minutes before the start time. Use high quality speakers and headphones for better sound quality. Please keep your microphones muted and video disabled as this may cause disturbance and bandwidth issue. Hope you must have seen this in the previous session. Questions will be taken via chat box. Please enter your questions in the chat box. Facilitator and moderator will help you to read it out and a few questions as per the time availability. Please fill the feedback forms after the event to help us understand more about the event management. We appreciate your cooperation. Noida chapter. This chapter will be facilitated by Roma. Over to you, Roma.
Thanks, Prashant. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So today we'll be taking the topic on my safe struggle, and it will be presented by the Noida chapter. And Siddhi Thakur is the person who will be presenting this session, and I will be acting as the moderator. So I will take up your questions towards the end of the session. So after Siddhi will complete her presentation. Siddhi is coming from like a very prestigious organization, Global Logic. She has 16 years of experience and almost 9 years into her SAFe journey. She has helped multiple organizations and multiple customers convert their journey to SAFe. She has a vast and wonderful amount of experience around SAFe. So feel free to ask your questions, whatever struggles you are facing yourself in transforming your teams into SAFe. So with that, I will hand over this quorum to Siddhi. Siddhi, can you start with introducing yourself and take up the session?
Okay, sure. Thank you, Roma. So, hello everyone. And like Roma said, I will present the topic of my safe struggle. Overall, have been in the industry for quite a few years now, about to be a decade. And how I generally introduce myself is in a Scrum team. I've played all roles, from developer to Scrum Master to product owner and little outsider and product manager. So I know and understand. I would like to believe that I know and understand the nuances of each and every role, which puts me in a good position to be an agile coach, which is the kind of role that I've been playing for the past couple of years. So over the last 7 years, um, I've helped scale multiple organizations onto SAFe. It started in 2014 or 2013 when one of my employers was really starting on with the SAFe struggle. This was quite early in the journey, and as of now, it started from SAFe 3.0 and now we are on SAFe 5.1. So we are not going to talk a lot about the introduction of SAFe, etc., because I believe the kind of champs we have on the board and this wonderful community of agile networking. We believe that everyone understands what large scale agile network is about, and if someone knows about large scale agile framework, then definitely would have heard of SAFe in one or the other references. What we're going to talk about majorly is the struggles that I have experienced the organizations go through in the last couple of years. Nevertheless, we'll start with a little bit of introduction, because for those of you who have not were not living SAFe day in and day out, we'll start with some of the recapping some of the concepts, and then for the majority part we are going to focus more and more on struggles. Okay, so the struggles or challenges that we're going to talk about will be divided into 3 different categories, and I will first define what those categories are, I will define what those categories are, and then we'll get into the challenges that I face and the solutions that we have been able to implement so far. Okay, starting on with the PR planning. So not that that this is the first area that every organization faces challenges in, but program layer in SAFe is definitely something that every team ends up implementing, because if you're not doing program level activities and you're not doing SAFe, this is a starting point of SAFe. So that's why I've kept the challenges minimalistic at the program level only. Okay, so starting on with the first event that defines the program layer, which is PR planning. So what PR planning is really is a critical first step to get the team started in SAFe. If you're not doing PR planning, you're not doing SAFe, and that's why it's also already called the heart of SAFe. um, then essentially it is an event which spans across multiple days, where multiple teams are planning for multiple sprints together. So if you don't know about PR planning yet, just think of your sprint plannings, and think of it in a way that a sprint planning is scaled up to a level where essentially a sprint planning is what a team does for one sprint. Now multiply it by certain factors, so multiple teams do it for multiple sprints. So that's what PR planning in very raw terms is. So the first set of challenges we're going to study about will be a PR planning. For a PI execution essentially means the entire duration for which you have planned the you've planned for in the PI planning. So again, think of it as a sprint duration. So sprint planning you plan for 2 weeks, but sprint execution is those 2 weeks. So PI is just some scaled up version of the sprint duration. So this is essentially a time period that's focused on meeting the planning commitments that we did in the previous activity. And then like I said, it's a duration which is divided into multiple sprints which act as reality checks. So multiple sprints because we are planning for because it's a scaled up version of the sprint duration. Okay, PI culmination is the end of the PI. So with this topic we come a real full circle on all the program level activities, starting from the planning to working on the commitments that you made in the planning, to ensuring or at least validating how much of those commitments could you actually meet. Okay, so that's PI culmination. So what we are focusing on here is basically this is a duration that's where people mostly juggle with two level of priorities. One priority is what you have of wrapping up the PI that just finished, and second level of priority, equally important, is what is coming up, because this is also collaborating with the time duration where the next PI planning preparations also go in. So a lot of organizations struggle through in that sense. What should I prioritize? Should I wrap up the last one or should I prepare for the next one? So essentially, this is usually designated by a time bound sprint that's called IP sprint, Innovation and Planning Sprint, which is where these two activities of wrapping up the last PI and preparing for the next one really happens. So far about introduction. So you understand, so that you understand these three different categories, and now on we go on to the struggles that I have seen organizations go through sorry, in each of these categories. So starting on with the PI planning. So couple of challenges, of course, and these are of course not all the challenges. It's not possible to talk about them in 30 or 40 minutes, but these are the ones that in my experience I've found most common that organizations struggle through. The first about planning readiness. So either teams are too ready, or they are too much ready or too less ready, and the main problem area behind that is there's no quantitative measure of what kind of readiness should I be doing. Okay, for sprint planning I still know, because it's a small number of people that are involved. I still know, okay, I've got 5 or 6 team members in the team whose capacity should be planned. If nothing else, if I'm not using any metrics, then nothing else I can base it on my gut feeling as a product owner, right? That how many sprints for how many stories should I keep ready for the sprint planning. For PR planning readiness, it's a whole different ball game, because it's multiplied at such a high level that so many intricacies and complexities come into play that it's not humanly possible for anyone uh, to plan for this event just based on a gut feeling. Okay, so that's what the problem area is, and thereby I think organizations are either too much prepared, where to go to the extent that the stories are divided, or all features that they wanted to plan, the stories of all of those features are divided, estimated, and everything. So teams just need to put it on the board for each sprint. Too less preparation would cater to an area uh, where the features are not yet planned and features are not yet groomed completely, and it is at a point now where teams are coming up to during the planning process, where teams are coming up and asking questions which no one in the PR planning participant area can really answer. So you will not be able to do effective planning, because there will be so many open questions that remain, that the whole idea of doing the PR planning activity will not really bear its fruit. So that's the one topic about planning readiness. Then the second is about definition of ready. Again, this is somehow related, but what I really mean by this one is, if you think of it from practical perspective, what I really mean by this one is, we have to define workflow for all our issue types. If you guys have been using Jira, or if you guys have been using Azure DevOps, then the work item types for all of the requirements that I have, for all of the categorization requirements that I have, either it's epics or features or stories or whatever it is, whatever we call it in our different world, each work item or each issue type here should have a defined life cycle, right? Starting from starting from when, what state should it be in when it reaches a product owner to first draft it, until the point it reaches UAT, or it moves to production, or even after that, because teams still have to ensure that once the features are released to production, then they keep a track of it and ensure that it's not causing an instability in the live environment. So I've seen a lot of organizations who really don't define this life cycle. So therefore they struggle that, okay, what state should my work item types or issue types be in to say that yes, they are ready. It could be a feature state ready, it could be ready for development, or anything like that. The idea is to explicitly define it and repeatedly talk about it, so it's ingrained in everyone's head. And then correspondingly, um, it should be followed, really, but that we'll talk about more in the solutions part. Then the business vision, this is another very common mistake, and this is, out of all the five that I've listed here, I would say this is the most common. So if you recall the typical agenda for PR planning, it's recommended to always start from the business vision, which must be shared by a business executive or a product management executive, or someone who's kind of leading the organization in some form and shape. So this uh, I would say this is a ritual that you must not forget at all, because what happens is, if you don't reiterate the business vision, people tend to forget about it. Okay, now think of Amazon for an example. Amazon started on with the idea, apart from Jeff Bezos making a lot of money and being and trying to be the wealthiest person on earth, but as an organization, Amazon started on with the idea of making life easy for customers, as simple as that. They did not talk a lot of hanky panky stuff, or they did not try to encrypt a lot of information. It was as simple as that. And even if you read a little bit of how Amazon as an organization works, you will realize this is what they still reiterate, starting from the point where Amazon was founded until the point that we are now, 10, 15, or how many number of years it is. Business vision has to be repeated every time until you get a sense that people are living it or breathing it, and otherwise it makes no sense. Okay, then the next is participation from the team. So this happens when teams get, or supposedly want to believe, that they have matured in the SAFe process. So what happens then? Okay, another PR planning, or like on the ground, for those of you who are actually living in that kind of environment where sprint plannings are done regularly, all of you know that over a period of time, sprint planning is either taken as a very casual activity, or people don't really are actively listening. They might be present from their, they might be having a physical presence, but not really actively participating. And this happens quite a lot, including my own Scrum teams, happens quite a lot in the grooming sessions, where the product owner will go on and on and on and explain the stories, but there will not be even one question coming up from the team. Whereas during the sprint execution or during the PR planning execution, there will be lots of questions coming in, which will suddenly top up as blockers, right? and the team's telling up, okay, we can't move on because I need an answer to this question, which was never preempted. So again, on the peer planning side, I've seen that if you do it repeatedly over a period of time, people tend to lose focus over it, or people tend to lose interest, and they're no longer actively listening, um, or actively participating, or not even present in some cases, in the peer planning process. The last one here is importance of the event. This is somewhat related to the previous one, because even if they're present, they're not really playing enough importance to the event. So either taking a little bit of casual attitude, okay, let's plan it for whatever we have right now, and then we'll do later, we'll see later how do we put it. Or another example could be anything that I don't know about, or anything that I find risk in, rather than taking the advantage of the peer planning event where everyone is actually supposed to be present in the meeting. People end up not taking the advantage of discussions and everyone having the same floor or the same virtual platform, and then tending to forget that, okay, this is something that we can figure out later, and right now just put it as a stretch goal, or as an uncommitted objective, so that we are not questioned about it later, because we find a scapegoat and say, okay, we already said there's a lot of risk in that. And this is not to say we cannot call out risks, we should, but all I'm saying here is we should call out risks only when we are sure that we are facing risks or dependencies that cannot be sorted out within the scope of peer planning discussion. So these are the challenges that cater to peer planning process in my experience. Now the solutions. I would not claim that all of these solutions were top notch and in the first moment and just had nipped the nail in the bud. No, not at all. But these are just some of the ideas that we implemented. Some of them, in some areas, we succeeded, and now all of you guys know, some tricks work in some teams, some tricks don't work in other teams. But overall, these were the solutions that we implemented, or we zeroed in, or we wanted to implement it, and we got a majority, I will not say consensus, but we got a majority of people signing into this kind of solution that we can cater to for each of these problems. uh, so I'll talk about solutions for each of the problems that I showed in the last slide, and then in the pattern will be that out of these solutions I will just pick up one solution that I saw having the most impact in maximum cases. Okay, so that kind of becomes a takeaway for you, but we'll come to that in the next slide. But for now, talking of solutions for each of the challenges that I showed in the last slide, one is planning readiness. So getting away from the idea of gut feeling and intuition of ensuring how ready are we for a PR planning process, we started to take art velocity very, very seriously. Okay, all of you know of sprint velocity, and that's exactly some version scaled up is the art velocity. Art is the collection of Scrum teams. So we started to measure and track velocity at the art level. Okay, so which means if in PI1 our Scrum teams were able to deliver items of 100 story points and next one 125 story points, then the same logic as you guys, probably most of you guys will already been living in, that for PI3 I will take an average of 100 and 125 and um, plan the features accordingly. So which kind of necessitates that you do plan your features in sort of story points or t-shirt sizing, anything that suits your organization. Okay, so that is the solution that we tried to implement. In some cases it just worked. In some cases we struggled a little bit even to measure art velocity, and this is kind of strange, the kind of popularity SAFe has gained. I don't know of a lot of tools. I know there is one called Jira Align, uh, which is actually a tool built to implement SAFe. But otherwise, Jira, Azure DevOps, or any other tools that we've been using, the tool itself doesn't provide you the capability of running SAFe. Like calculating the art velocity or calculating some of the other things. So this is one of the solutions that we tried. So it was a struggle even to measure, even to go to that point where we can measure the art velocity. But nevertheless, once you pass through that initial struggle, it does help quite a lot. The next one is the definition of ready. So we defined workflow for each of the requirements at the epic level, at the feature level, at the story level. And it was not just someone sitting in one corner of the room and deciding, okay, this is how workflow should be. This has to be something that at least leaders from each stream, product owner, product management, scrum master, devs, QAs, architects, everyone has to be involved in the decision making process of how a workflow for each work item should be. Okay. And then once you identify that this is the state that I want all of my features to be in before I plan them for the PI, just stick with it. As simple as that, just stick with it. Okay, so that's the second solution that we kind of implemented. It saw it working. Okay, it takes a little bit of time before before people get disciplined about changing the workflow states or keep updating the tool about the current status. But then, yeah, once people let go of these teething troubles, then it really helps. Business vision. I think I said it more or less with the problem, right? Repeat it, no matter if it is changed or not changed. Of course, all of us realize that business vision is not something which changes every 2 months, and if it is, then there's seriously something wrong with the organization. But even if it is changing, even if it is not changing, just make it a habit to repeat it every time. Okay, one reason is that all of the people who have been participating in the previous PI planning should listen to it so that they can ingrain it. Second reason is over the duration of PI, the kind of growth we are seeing, all across the IT industry now, especially in services business. So typically in a duration of PI, multiple new team members are joining in, either from within the organization or from different teams or from outside the organization. But it's important to also keep them aware of a business vision, which can be, um, classified in very, very simple terms. Participation from the team. So there are two facts to it, right? One is a physical participation. The other is getting people actively listening and participating. So actively listening and participating is something that I'll rather say that cover it with the next solution as well. That we kind of went on and on and on and reiterated the importance of the event by doing a SAFe for Team session for the team. It doesn't. So if you guys know it, then SAFe for Teams is a training course for 2 days, for 2 full days, which SAFe recommends that every team member who's participating in the PR planning should go through. Okay. So no one, ideally, no one participating in the actual PI planning event should not should have participated in the SAFe for Teams training at least once. Okay, we took it one step further and reiterated this event for multiple times for at multiple durations and on multiple occasions, maybe once in a quarter or just before the PI planning, depending on how we realize the feeling is really between the team. Now, I don't mean that you should plan to take out 2 days of team's productivity for the entire quarter duration or whatever time frame you decide to repeat these sessions for, and do this training for 2 full days. For 2 full days, the idea here is even if you pick up a small part of it and get a reiterate some of the points about SAFe principles or the importance of SAFe all in all, or the importance of PR planning or running a mock PR planning in an hour or so, that should suffice. Okay, no, we don't need to go over the board and plan 2 days of training for everyone on the team every 2 or 3 months. That's not what I mean. Um, so this part, the last, is more if you've done it well and you've done it repeatedly, and if you've done it in a good way, then this should be enough for teams to get actively participating from their heads and their hearts. Okay, the first point about participation from team, just to ensure that more and more people are able to are physically present on the event, we started to publish the dates of the PR planning upfront at the start of the year. We used to publish the dates of the entire PR planning that will happen for that specific year. So these are the solutions that we have kind of implemented. And out of all of these solutions, I would say if you have to pick up one thing, if you are in a safe running in a safe environment, or or trying to set up something and it's just too much to start with, if you have to start with one thing, then it should be calculating the art velocity. Because I mean, not only because SAFe places a lot of importance on metrics, but also in my experience, when you run programs of size of 300 or 400 or maybe more people, um, then quantitative measure of doing is the only way of doing it. Otherwise, no, it's not going to work. Okay, data driven, and all of us are hearing so much about data in our different worlds. So everything has to be data driven. So if you have to pick up one thing, then I will say it will just be calculating the art velocity that had the maximum impact, which helped us plan until the optimum point. So we kind of knew, okay, whether we are underprepared or overprepared, we knew it upfront. Okay, I'll just check the time. Okay, so the next one is about PI execution. Again, PI execution is analogous to sprint execution, the whole duration of the sprint or the PI in which we are expected to meet our planning commitments. So again, a couple of items here. Metrics, like I already said, in the absence of reporting mechanism, we were often behind schedule. And to make it even worse, we ended up knowing only towards the end of the PI that no, boss, this is not going to work. Okay, we are definitely behind schedule. We will not be able to meet our commitments. So this was again one thing that we realized, one challenge that we faced. And it if you experience SAFe and also Scrum ceremonies, and if you look at some of the teams deeply, you will be surprised to know that no matter how many tools we end up using, no matter how much importance is given to data in the world around us, we still end up not paying enough attention to metrics and reporting. Okay, no graphs, no no way of representing the data, no way of analyzing the data to be able to learn from our mistakes. So that's one. Second is sprint demos. So sprint demos, I know essentially, with the sprint demos, the focus was always, or the focus has always been, and the recommendation has always been, just show stories. Okay, that is what sprint is for, to show the stories that we have delivered. Now, I would dare to say this does not work for us in the SAFe environment. Okay, because SAFe recommends that you show sprints within the sprint demo. You show stories within the sprint demo, and you show features with the PI demo. Okay, more often than not, that was too late for us. Okay, I'm not saying that PI demo should be done only in the last way, on only the last towards the last of the or the end of the PI, but it SAFe also doesn't typically recommend that you should do the PI or demo quite often, or the system demo as they call it, quite often. There is really no guideline around it. Um, and the other big thing is, you cannot be doing two different sort of demos very frequently. And all of us know the environment that we work in. Preparing for demos, no matter what the books say, preparing for demos takes in a lot of energy. Okay, and so much that at some point in time it feels that you're not preparing for delivering in a production environment or delivering to the customer. You're actually sprinting to show demo only. That becomes your eventual goal. And I mean, maybe I've been just unlucky and that's what I've experienced, but that's what I've experienced quite often. So if our sprint demos focused only on stories, then we face issues because showing features towards the end of the PI was just too late to get any feedback. Okay, so that's the second challenge. Then Scrum of Scrums. So again, I would dare to say this is to go behind, to go against a little bit of principles here, which here says Scrum of Scrums, as the name suggests, it should ideally be a meeting conducted frequently, where Scrum Masters of of each of the Scrum teams are meeting up and discussing about what's going on. But we realize that in the Scrum of Scrums, when teams are coming up with the challenges that they're facing, the Scrum Masters were not able to solve them. It was not because they were less on authority or less on knowledge or whatsoever, but it was just something that needed a lot of discussion, and the action items that came out of it were not really something that Scrum Masters had to work on. Rather, getting the other team members, either from the Scrum team or from shared resources, or from other roles in the program layer we're supposed to or should be fixing, because Scrum Masters themselves have a very, of course, limited authority. Then dependency, this is one of the most common again. Dependencies, when you do the PI planning, dependencies are expected to be drawn on the program board with those red threads related to it. But unfortunately, what I have seen is it just stays there on the PI planning. Once you've done it in the PI, once you did it in the PI planning, and then you just forget about it. No real mechanism exists so far, or I have seen teams implementing so far, where dependencies were actively tracked. Okay, and when I say actively, I literally mean the word that way. So the teams should do need to plan and manage those dependencies, which is what doesn't happen really. Again, this could be a challenge because of the tool. Like I said, Jira is providing just plugins to implement SAFe, but Jira Align, which was originally called Agile Craft, um, Jira Align is one tool where it shows up. It gives a good, nice view of how dependencies are managed and related. But nevertheless, it's a very expensive tool. You can have it only for minimal 1,000 users, which is not typically a scale that organizations start their SAFe journey with. So it ends up either remaining with the physical world, or now that we are in work from home mode, it becomes sort of a Google sheet or any other sheet that you are maintaining, which is a very, very ugly and inefficient way of managing things. Then integration testing. Uh, by integration testing, I really mean that feature level testing. Okay, sprint testing is happening, and the teams are developing, and the QA team members are testing and giving feedback, and bugs are being fixed, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to feature level testing, we realize it was always pushed to the last sprint. So it's that the your PI commitment is always the feature level. The end-to-end functionality has to work. So for example, if your login mechanism or if your authentication mechanism started on with logging in, and then having a multi-factor authentication done, and then someone putting in an OTP and then being able to log in. So these could be different stories. So the feature is users should be able to successfully log in via multi-factor authentication. Okay. Now, this whole feature can be divided into multiple parts. First, user should be able to log in. Then, if it forgets the password, then it should be able to. That becomes one story, successful login. The second story becomes that forgetting the password. If the user forgets the password, then they should be able to reset it. Then the third becomes that you have the OTP assigned, and then a successful OTP authentication really happens. These could be three different stories, but unless all these three pieces are working together, we cannot expect to say our successful authentication feature is completed. Okay, so all of these stories have to work together. That's what I mean by integration testing. Otherwise, your PI commitment is not really. um, I think someone unmuted themselves. If you're not talking, please go on mute. Thank you. So so the feature level testing should be done earlier, not later. Okay. So again, the solution. um, Now this is also probably an interesting concept. So there could be whole set of metrics that you can start with. Okay. There could be um, sprint burn down or a sprint velocity that you might already be taking care of. Then there could be program level, there could be executive level as well. What we realized was when we started to publish the metrics at the team level, at the sprint level, sprint velocity and sprint burn down and so on and so forth, we realized that our executives, our senior leadership, okay, vice president, senior vice president, whoever it is, but not really interested in sprint level burn down. Okay, they said, okay, why are you telling me this? Because at that level of leadership, you're often concerned is whether you will whether you will reach your milestone or not. Okay, whether you will meet your business milestone or not, whether it is a PI or it is quarter or end of the year or so on, whatever it could be. So we realized that it would be effective to divide our metrics into three different components. Because as a scrum master, I want to know whether my sprint is on track or not. As a senior vice president, I want to know whether you will be able to meet the we will be able to meet the final eventual goal of of the business milestone that is committed between the organizations at that level. Okay, so we divided our metrics into three different categories: executive metrics, program metrics, and team level metrics. Okay, this sounds like going really obsessive about it, but it's really simple. If you start with maybe a couple of them, which already the tools that we use help us preparing in. So that was the first solution. The second is demos. Again, I think this much totally quite a lot I covered when I discussed about the solution. So we started to do sprint demos to you to showcase stories and features both. So what we did was, if a feature is finishing in sprint 3 of pi1, which we called as sprint 1.3, because 1 for pi and 3 for sprint, if our feature is finishing in sprint 1.3, then we showed the complete feature in dot one in sprint 1.3 demo. But we showed the stories that led to the completion of this feature in sprint 1.2 and 1.2, 1.1 and 1.2. So 1.2, 1.1 we showed the stories, and 1.3 we showed the complete feature. That gave us enough time to implement the feedback that the teams were giving in. And the added benefit that this approach had was that we were able to map that on the program board, whichever team wanted to or committed to delivering a specific feature in a particular sprint is actually meeting that commitment and actually demoing it also. So this kind of becomes an evidence that yes, you have met that commitment. Nevertheless, there were still a lot of features which were shown in the last few sprints of the pi, and thereon we still faced a little bit of struggle. But when we started to implement it, a lot of our problems were really solved, or at least we knew a path forward. Then Scrum of Scrums, our Scrum of Scrums, now someone might kill me for this. So our Scrum of Scrums was not really focused just on Scrum Masters. Um, our Scrum of Scrums had all the leaders at the program layer. Okay, so not really all PMs or all POs, but yes, at least some of the representatives of the program management and product owner group, a senior solution architect or whoever is working at the program layer, and a DevOps, which is like, I mean, I cannot highlight the importance of having a DevOps person quite enough, because um, DevOps, the way that the teams are supposed to be structured in SAFe, DevOps is a different team, a systems team, how they call it, how SAFe calls it. So systems team becomes a very, very important aspect of all of the team's delivery. So if I have to deploy my implementation to a dev or QA or UAT or whatever environment, and the environment is not available, or I have other issues with the pipeline, or it could be anything, right? So only DevOps can, those are really DevOps issues that they have to resolve. So depending on what is the scale of your DevOps team, it could be one person shared across two teams. It could be a team spanning across a complete organization and working in a Kanban mode. That depends. But all what I mean here is you must represent uh, these, have some representatives of DevOps guys within the team. Then dependency management. So we started to have a fixed format of the dependency tracker. Okay. Again, I will not claim that we found a very good way of doing this, but again, we were stuck to still Google Sheets, which is still an inefficient way of managing it. But unless we have any other physical commodity that I come to know of, or unless it is devised, then we'll still continue to manage in some live tracker. But the important point here is we started to look at it very regularly. Okay, not only in our Scrum of Scrums, but in our in all of our team or Scrum level events, team or program level events. I mean, okay, not really stand up, but yes, other than that, the idea is that we revisit it every few days. Then the last is integration testing. So this point, actually, with integration testing and sprint demos are quite related. Only those features we were allowed to be shown in sprint demo whose integration testing has been done. Okay, unless this has been approved by QA, and by approved I mean not really producing a bug-free feature. That's something that even NASA cannot even claim to do. So as long as we do not have any features, any bugs for this specific feature, which are of critical or major priority, we let the demo happen. but integration testing must have been done, and no critical or high priority bug should be open before you are able to push the feature, to show the feature in the sprint demo. Okay, and I would say in terms of the impact, I will say this one was quite difficult to choose, because this definitely had more a lot of impact to have features show in the sprint demo and collaborating it with the integration testing being done before the feature is really demoed. Nevertheless, for my love of data driven mechanism, I will say that uh, we still kept it to some metrics. So we published feature completion report at the PI level. Okay, so this is one of the parts that that came in here. Okay, so we published, like I said, we had a lot of metrics. We devised a couple of metrics, and over a period of time, it really kept improving. But this one metrics really was had the maximum impact so far. It could be because we were not doing the other ones in the right way, or we were not able to analyze the other metrics in the right way. But nevertheless, this had the maximum impact in our case, where what this metrics really shows is the team planned 6 features for a specific PI. Okay, then on a weekly basis, or in a bi-weekly or a fortnightly basis, we started to look at these metrics. Okay, how many of these these features are really completed by how many stories? So this, you see, are features, and completion was usually calculated in the number of stories. So if this feature had 10 stories, so consider this complete span of 10 stories, out of which only these are complete, these right ones. These are complete, these are planned, and these ones still remain. Okay, so this started to show us more, give us more visibility at the level of PI, and depicting how close or how far are we in meeting our PI commitment. This is also called epic completion report. I think SAFe calls it epic or feature completion report. PI culmination. Okay, I'll quickly rush through it in the next 5 7 minutes, and so we have more time for questions. For challenges, we've seen that the features that were spilled from last PI were not really taken into consideration in terms of prioritization. Either people forgot it, or didn't pay enough attention, or took them for granted. This could be several reasons. Then in the PI retrospective, we did not really discuss the items or action items that came from the last PI last retro, because, and this is majorly because in the SAFe PI retrospective agenda, the inspect and adapt, there is no really agenda item specifically to talk about what are your action items from, what is the status of the action items that we discussed in the last PI, in the last PI retrospective. Exit criteria. So often moving from one PI to other was more like done implicitly, either because of embarrassment that the features were not, that the teams were not able to meet their commitment, or because of other situations, because dependencies were not managed properly, and therefore the commitment was not made. But no matter what, there was no hard line that I saw really. Okay, getting everyone together, say, okay, come on guys, everyone did a good job, and then this is where we are in terms of finishing our next PI, and we are going to, from this point on, we are going to start on with a new PI. So that is one. So there was no real objective exit criteria defined for each of these PIs. Then the IP sprint, for those of you especially working in the service industry would relate to it, that people end up planning a lot of work, either implicitly or explicitly planning a lot of work for the IP sprint itself. Either it was really bug fixing sprint, or hardening sprint, or any buffer sprint. Buffer sprint is still fine, but teams ended up planning for the IP sprint, or kept pushing things for the IP sprint. Then program, we never at the end of the PI, we never spoke about what was our program velocity. Okay, at the end of the PI, we never made an explicit call out for that, and let everyone know, and let everyone compare it over a period of time, that okay, was it good from the last few, or was it bad, or was it more or less, or whatever it was. And if it was more or less, then analyzing it. So we were not able to learn it from the numbers point of view. Then solution, we started to take in, we started to have special tags added in a tool to call spillover. So we ensured that they were prioritized. The spillover, the features with spillover tag were by default prioritized over the others, and that was kind of an understanding that everyone developed over a period of time. Then PI retrospective. So we started to add those action items at the in the PI on the program backlog, which is what is recommended for Scrum as well, and then compare the actions of our last few PI on a quantitative basis. Then we define an exit criteria, an objective set of exit criteria, which was more like a checklist, a true and false checklist. No objective, no subjectivity. Okay, no long answer to this question. Whether you did this or you didn't do this, simple. And at the team level, we started to calculate a sort of a score that out of these 10 items, how many of these were met by us at the program level. Okay, so whether we had a 50% success, 60% success, or whatever it was. IP sprint, so we tried to plan it, and this was like just like reiterating what SAFe already recommends. And then program velocity was something that we started to compare, not just for the last program, for not just for the last PI, but also we started to build it over a period of PI, over a period of the complete PI duration. So we were able to compare. This year we had 4 PIs, and then these were the velocities. These were the velocity for the complete year. So the maximum impact was again having on the velocity. Again, it's, I would say, for all of the solutions that I recommended, the maximum impact we saw were in most cases were the ones that were based on data and nothing else. Maybe because of the scale that we were operating in.
Thank you, Siddhi. Thank you for very informative session. And I'm sure that audience got good information. We got a lot of questions from the audience. So I'll start with them because we have very few minutes left. So the first question is from RC Goel. He is asking, he or she, sorry, I don't know, but the question is, why SAFe? What situations in the organization warrant them to move to SAFe? So want to like understand around that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll answer that, but quick time check. How much time do we have for Q&A? So I'll respond it accordingly.
Yeah, we have very little time. I mean, yeah, if you can go quick because we have 7, 8
Okay.
questions. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. So why SAFe? I'll take one step back and say why large scale agile at all. So I would say quick answer would be when you realize that just having the development teams work in an agile fashion will not work. You want to have the complete organization working in an agile mode. It could be your HR team, it could be your marketing team, it could be other teams as well, your product management, your product owners, and your executives. So when you want to scale the agile and scrum at the organization level, that is where you need large scale agile framework. Now coming to why SAFe, large scale agile framework were there are quite a few popular in the market, out of which SAFe is the only one which has been keeping itself updated with the latest changes in the market. So they've been
Mhm.
adapting themselves and changing. So that's why I'd say why SAFe.
So would you also recommend to use it for the smaller teams, or it is only for the larger teams? One, you said that because the HR and other business partners also need to be part of, so that's a framework, only framework SAFe, which says that, okay, bring everyone onto this, SAFe. But if the teams are small, 5 to 10 team members who are developers, would you still recommend SAFe for them, or would you
No,
only recommend for the larger teams?
no. So SAFe is recommended for minimal 50 people. If
Mhm.
you're less than 50 people participating in this journey, then it's not worth the effort because there is too much overhead involved of doing the other activities that are needed at the program level.
Sure, sure. And here one another add-on question is, what are the factors to consider SAFe over the other scaled agile? So that you already answered that
Yes.
because they are keeping themselves updated. Okay.
Yes.
So and one question from Shalu is, what are the other metrics behind, besides art velocity that you would recommend to use, and why it was concluded that art velocity is the best measuring metric? Why not others?
Okay. So to answer the first part of the question first, so um, other than art velocity, I think the epic or a feature completion report feature completion report, release burn down chart, a lot of similar metrics that are recommended as a part of the SAFe framework can be and were implemented in our case. So in our case, it wasn't concluded that art velocity will be is the thing to go, and we implemented just this one out of the other options that we had. We implemented art velocity. We started to calculate art velocity, then the feature completion, and then the epic burn down, release burn down, and then we realized that program velocity had, or the art velocity had the maximum impact. So it's not that we have not continuing to implement with the others, but this has the maximum impact.
Okay. And in the metrics, you also said executive, program level, and team level metrics. So so what were the metrics which you used at the executive or program or the team level?
At the executive level, we majorly use the release burn down chart. Okay, so how many epics were really planned and how many are really released. That is one. The second we used was the epic to bug ratio. Okay, so how many of our features when they were or how many of our business features or epics or implementations when deployed on production, how many of them reported bugs on from the production system, because they are because these two metrics help you measure the schedule, okay, with release burn down, and then the quality, which are two most important parameters with the epic to bug ratio.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And another question which Shalu is asking, that is there any sorry, it went down. Were there any new challenge in the PI that you faced over work from home when the work from home was implemented rather than face to face? Like, what was the any new challenge around that?
So the biggest challenge we faced were around the PI planning process only, because when we moved over to the virtual world to do the PI planning process, the whole idea of doing of the activity of PI planning is majorly around everyone have together, and there's a lot of, we can say, during the PI planning there's a lot of someone would sense it as a chaos, but there's a lot of energy in the room when you do actually the PI planning process. So this was the challenge that we faced to move over from to move our PI planning process from the physical to the digital world. One, because you miss that physical interaction, which is the whole essence of PI. Second is the absence of any tool in the market other than Jira Align, which is not that popular yet, which is too expensive. There was no real tool available in the market who can help run PI planning seamlessly.
Okay, so but you were using Jira only for your teams?
We were using Azure DevOps.
Okay, Azure DevOps. Okay.
Yes.
Another question from Subramaniam is, if PAE level integration testing is done at the last that you mentioned, how are you managing the or controlling the quality of the products or the defect leakage? I do know that you also mentioned that feature testing also you introduced. So probably that were you doing the integration just at the PI end, or were you also doing it simultaneously?
So the question that was asked, that's exactly the challenge that I mentioned. So when we were doing it only in the end, then we were not able to manage it. We were not able to manage to control the defect leakage. So that's why the solution that was recommended here, that we prepone the feature testing or the integration testing to the sprint in which the feature, the last story of the feature is being accomplished.
Yeah, that's a very good even takeaway for me. So that was very good. So do it twice. First you do at the story level, and then you also do it when the feature is complete.
Yeah.
Another question from Shalu, what was the duration of SOS meeting?
We did it twice a week for 30 minutes.
Okay, okay. And so there is one question from Shailesh. She's saying that can you suggest some case study or material study so that we can get more knowledge about Scrum structure?
Okay. About Scrum structure or SAFe, or
He's
Scrum
asking
structure and
about
SAFe,
Scrum
or
structure, but yeah, even around the SAFe, I mean, are there any case studies that you can recommend?
oh, definitely quite a lot on the website. So what I can do is maybe to the organizers, I can send over some reference links that that can be passed on to the participants here.
Yeah, and even on the SAFe website, there are a lot of case studies which they showcase.
Yes.
Once you
Yes.
do the Lean SAFe or some SAFe certifications, they share a lot of case studies over there.
Yes.
Last question I'll just take from Shalu. Was there no PI exit defined while PI planning? Were you defining any exit criteria over there? When you were doing
For
the
the
PI, was there any exit criteria which you were defining for the PIs?
So not every time. Okay, so exit criteria was something that we had as a standard you know I will not say unchanging list, because you evolve a period of time, you realize these items should be added. But these were the exit criteria was not really related to was the deliverables. Okay, so think of it as a definition of done. Your definition of done will not change with respect to every story. So that was a definition of done at the program level, that's our exit criteria. We'll exit a PI if we accomplish these items, then we can say that we exited the last PI graciously.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And did you ever face the challenge that the teams are not ready to adopt SAFe, even though they are 50 people? There is a dire need of changing them to SAFe. People are ready to adopt Agile, but SAFe, some people are still not so much, open to adapt it unless leadership, pushes them. So, but did you
Hmm.
ever face that kind of a challenge where you need to even talk to leadership and, convince them to adopt SAFe?
I would say they're not, they're not challenges. People don't come up with, suggesting or resisting the transformation to SAFe in the initial few months, only because of the popularity this framework has gained, only because this is more, as professionals, this has more or less become a credential for us that I know how things and SAFe are done. So initially you won't I have not faced up any upfront resistance. But nevertheless, you see it over a period of time when people get bored of a ritual. That's when we kind of reiterate the importance and really do it. But otherwise, it has become more like a marketing factor that I want to be a part of SAFe because it's very popular in the market.
Okay. Thank you, Siddhi. Thank you so much for the, wonderful session and answering a lot of questions. Very informative session, and